Alright, welcome back to the tutorial. So in the previous tutorial, Bob started going into training a little bit to be able to fight back, right, from our enemy NPC here. And of course this is still a little bit meaningless because, well, there's no collision setup or anything. And the sword, of course, is a little bit off-center here, which I think actually kind of looks cool. Makes it almost look like he's, tossing it like a normal human being would from sort of the side. But I know for some people, usually we'll have the weapons come from directly in the middle of the character. So we can talk about that a little bit. But in order to do that, we have to recognize a couple of inherent problems here. So let's get into it. Let's learn something today. Okay, so in the previous tutorial I talked about points, right? And we looked at Bob here, and I'm going to bring it up again. And if we wanted to, let's go ahead and do it. Let's create a point for where we want maybe the sword to come out of. So we can call this point here weapon shot, right? And right now that point is set to 0, 0, right? But you can't really see the point for a few reasons. One is this origin point of 0, 0 is on top of it. And two, the screen is a little small, you know? So let's move the origin point actually to the end here so we can move it around. Let's say the X position is going to be 32. Do you barely see it here? Here's the point. Okay, there's our point. So we could make it 32, and then halfway would be 16, and you see the point of origin is right there for weapon shot. Now we could make this our point of origin. The problem is when Bob is looking up, it's still saying that this point of origin is x32 and then y16. Can you envision what I'm saying here is the problem? That would place our point of origin, picture Bob looking up, would leave it right here. So now Bob is shooting the weapon from his side anyway. So one thing you could do is you could set up multiple points of origin, right? You could set up something like, you could do weapon shot 1 or weapon shot 0, and this would be his point of origin for when his degree is 0. You could add another point here and say weapon shot 1 or weapon shot 90, which I think might be a little bit better. And then you'd have to picture Bob looking down 90 degrees. That would make the X position 16, the Y position 32. Do you see the little point there? It's a little bit difficult to see. Then we could add another one and call it weapon shot 180. And now Bob is facing the left on this one, which means we need an X position of 0 and a Y position of 16. Let's see if it's there. Yep, there it is. And the last one would be weapon shot 270. And that would be Bob facing up, so we want it right here. So can you figure out the coordinates of that one? How do we get the crosshair right there? Right, we need an X position of 16 and a Y position of 0. So now we have a point of origin for all of our weapons here to be shot from. So let's close this off, right? This is one way we can do it, and hit apply. Now if we go back into Bob attacks, we can say, when we create the object, we can say what position we want it, but that's not really going to work right here. We need to set up a way so that we know what angle Bob is and then establish it based on that condition. Let me show you what I mean. So we've got this event here, this sub-event here. Let's go ahead and set up some conditions by saying that the direction of Bob is equal to 0, right? And here you could use 1 through 8 for direction mode, or in degrees. We're going to use degrees here. Yeah, I think that'll work. All right. So if the direction of Bob is 0, what point do we want to use here? What do we want to use as our origin point? We want to use weapon shot 0. Let's bring this down, and let's change this to our weapon shot 0. So that would be, did I miss it? Sprite. There's Sprite. Position, X position of a point, and that's Bob's. The name of the weapon, of the point in quotation marks, would be weapon shot 0. Let's hit apply. Let's get rid of our old one here, and let's copy this and then paste it in our Y position and change this to point Y. Leave the base layer. Okay, we want to do our Z order here. We do want to add the angle, and we do want to rotate the sword as well. Let's just see how we do with this first. Okay, notice it's not firing here, but here. Okay, and notice how the sword is coming out a little bit more in front of Bob, so we know it is working. The problem, as you can see, is it still looks off, right? Okay, so why is that the case? Remember, let's take a look at Basic Kingdom Room here. Let's go to sword, and let's edit it with Pascal so we can see this. Now, remember, this is, let's go to size, 64 by 64, okay? The way GDevelop sees this is it doesn't see this empty space as nothingness like we do. It basically sees this as one big block of, mass, right? In other words, it values all of this space. So the fact that it's off is because, the reason why it's off, excuse me, is because it's creating it at 0, 0 right here, and including all of this empty space. So what do we learn from this? What we learn is that it makes more sense to, when you're creating your sprites, to try to take up the whole screen, actually, right? So that your sprite essentially becomes all useful space. If we had done that, or if I had done that, then it would be a lot easier to deal with the using our points. So the question becomes, what do you do about this? Well, the easiest thing would probably be to go back in and just recreate the sword and make it 64 by 64. The problem is I kind of like the way the sword looks with in terms of our inventory or whatnot. So we could use some just basic offset math, right? Because it's basically half the width here. We could use some offset math in order to correct for this if need be. So let's just try to do that a little bit here, right? So let's hit cancel. And when we create the sword here, right, and we're going to have to account for these variables at some point, or account for these offsets at some point. You'll see what I mean by that when we get there. So we want to use the X position, right, we could do this a number of ways. We could set new points. We could just add a hard code here for it, right? So what's the best way to do this? Well, I would say probably the best way, let's just first see if we can get it lined up. Okay, so if we look again at how that was working, it was a little bit too far down, right? So we can account for the Y position here. We've got to bring it up a little bit. So we can do, let's try bob.pointY minus, let's do half the width here of Bob, 16. That might be too much, but let's just see. Okay, notice it did come up a little bit though, right? And so you can see that the 0, 0 point is starting to get up here actually. Remember, there's a lot of empty space here. Let's bring it up a little bit more. Let's do minus, don't want to bring it up too much. Let's just add 8 to that. So what's that, minus 24? Let's hit OK. Closer, right? Maybe we do need to make it 32 here. All right. All right, look at that. Now we're getting somewhere. Okay, so what do we do with this information here? I think the best thing to do is not actually to just leave the math here, okay? Because you might want to account for, you might want to change the weapon out or something later on. So probably the best thing we can do is actually change the point in Bob's edit points. So we've got weapon shot 0 here, and rather than keep the Y at 16, we want to minus 32 from that, right? So that would be was that minus 16? Is that right? It would be 16 minus 32 would be negative 16, right? Get out of here, calculator. I got this. So let's try that out. Let's see if we can just put minus 16 here. Actually, never tried. No, doesn't want me to. All right, let me get my point back here. There we go. Let's see if I can drag it up past it. Nope, see, I can't. Oh, wait, yes, I can. What? That was a little weird. So I had to drag it first. Oh, boy. Okay, let's just try adding negative here. Did that work? It did work. Okay. What? What just happened? Yeah, okay. All right. So, now that we've edited that point, let's hit apply. Let's go back into this and let's just simply say, go to that origin point for weapon shot. And in the future, we might actually designate that the shot point for the sword, right? So we would do weapon shot sword 0. Let's see. Yep, So when we're moving, though, it does not like that. Interesting. When we're standing still, it's totally fine. When we start moving, though, it does that effect. Interesting. That's something new. Now the question is, does it do that when we do a hard math coding here? Let's set this back to 16, where it was before. And let's hit apply. Now let's do our, what was it, minus 32. Okay. Alright, let's see how that goes here. Nope, see, it's got no problem. Interesting. Alright, so we have found somewhat of an issue here. And as programmers, we're going to have to just work with that issue as best as we can. And that means leaving our hard coding right now. Well, actually, that leaves us with two options, right? The best one, I will say, is to probably change your pixels here to a true 64 by 64, taking up the whole width, right? Second best option here seems to be leave the hard coding. Okay, so we did one here. I'm going to say go ahead and try on your own to figure out the directions and points for the rest of these. Alright, so go ahead and add another sub-event here, figure out the directions, follow these, and when we come back, we'll start back here together.